Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Page One podcast, where we dive deep behind the cover of entrepreneurship and try to uncover the what's and whys behind a business's success story and the people in the business. I'd like to welcome Jim to the podcast today. Jim has an extensive background in law with decades of experience, and he's also a published author. Super excited to have you today, Jim. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mickey. Glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about Jim and who he was growing up as a kid.
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, northeastern Massachusetts on the water, and a great place to grow up, by the way, and I still spent a lot of time up there. I went to college at the University of Virginia, which got me down to Virginia. I majored in English, which got me involved in writing, which has always been, since that time, my principal passion, the thing I'm most interested in doing. Got out of college and didn't really want to have a desk job, never really wanted to have a desk job. So I was a private detective for 2 years, and that was a very interesting and rewarding experience, although not without its downsides. So I went to law school and have been a lawyer since then, did trial work for the first half of my career, then did business work. And over the last 5 years, I started writing novels.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, we're gonna dive into a lot of those things. But beyond the legal world, what experiences or were there any individuals that significantly shaped your early interests kind of in the entrepreneurship world and led you down the career path that you're currently on?
My father was self-employed. He was a small town doctor.
Okay.
But I don't know that, his example, although I loved and respected him in every way, I didn't really want to emulate that. I didn't want to be a doctor, certainly. As I said, I think the biggest thing for me getting out of college was I just didn't want to have a 9-to-5 job and do the same thing every day for the rest of my life. And of course, I ended up practicing law is not the same thing every day for the rest of your life, but I did end up having a desk job for the vast majority of my professional life, and I was very satisfied with it. But I think I just found more contentment in the other two ends of my careers, the writing and the detective work, just such free-form things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could imagine. I'm sitting at a desk job every single day.
Same with others.
Yeah. Your pre-law experience involves the private detective work that you mentioned. Did the uniqueness of that job bring a perspective and did it help you? Were there any transferable skills from private detective work that have helped you with your legal career?
Absolutely. Private detective, we did criminal work, chase skips, did domestic relations, did insurance defense. I guess that's about it. And I've done some of that in my career as a lawyer. The difference between a lawyer and a private detective is lawyers are governed by rules. The procedural rules or ethical rules, the rules of evidence, and you have to, do your case within the rules or you don't practice law much longer. As a private detective, there aren't any rules. The only rule is how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to do? And I like this about the job. You got a problem at 3:00 in the afternoon and they tell you, be at this place at 5, and you had to figure out how to solve the problem, make the case. And, I didn't always go well or successfully, but I really liked that free-form aspect of it. Right? It's creative.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's some pretty cool stories that you could talk about. Maybe not on today's podcast.
Next time.
Maybe off air.
Yeah.
So obviously there was what drew you to writing these legal thrillers is probably your path that you've taken in your, the book.
Well, I've been writing off and on it's been my principal hobby or one of my principal hobbies since I was in college. And I didn't have much success with it. And, 5 or 6 years ago, I decided that time had come to really take a full-time crack at it. And I realized that the thing I knew best was this sort of law-private detective combination, which Joth sort of fits in. He's a lawyer, but he's a lawyer who gets quirky problems that he has to figure out, from both ends, both legally and investigatively at the same time. And I thought that I had a wealth of knowledge that would allow me to develop those stories. And, the story of Joth Proctor, you sort of have to start with a basic person that you sort of know. So, he's from Massachusetts. He went to the University of Virginia. He did some things that I've done. So that allowed me to build a fictional character from a starting point that I was familiar with. And that's what I did. I mean, Joth Proctor certainly isn't me, thank God. But, he starts with me, a nugget of me.
Very cool. I haven't read it, but it's something that I definitely
Well,
want to
there's
check
5
out.
of them. There's 4 of them right now and a 5th coming out in June. So take
Good
a
for
long
you.
weekend.
I'm not that big of a reader. That'll take me a month or two. So what do you hope the readers gain from these novels beyond the entertainment value of a thrilling story, right?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I wrote this isn't literature, these are beach reads or, Saturday front of a fireplace read in the wintertime.
Hmm.
But I do think they're true. They tell true stories of true people, and they reflect problems that relationship problems of who I am, who I want to be, how I get there, how to work your way through dilemmas, romantic problems. So I do think that I've tried real hard to make these things, make these characters, people you can get your hands around and say, yeah, I know that person, or maybe even that person relates to me. And I hope you can take away some lessons on living from these stories.
It's very interesting. How was your family's reaction to when you started writing these stories and, obviously somewhat related to maybe some personal aspects of your life? What was their take on it?
Well, my wife's been very supportive of it. My daughter's been very supportive of it. My mother's probably rolling over in her grave. She always wanted me to be a lawyer, and that's probably why I became a lawyer. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, I think everybody I know, number one, is happy that I was able to fulfill what's been, a lifetime desire to do this.
Hmm.
And, everybody wants to, most people have something that they really would like to have done or do. And most of us don't get a chance to fulfill that. And I think most of my friends are happy for me that I did. And I think most of them are getting some enjoyment from the stories as well.
It's really cool. I've never really spoken to somebody who's written a book, and it's
Well, it
awesome.
sounds
Good
like
for you.
there's a lot of us
Good for
out
you.
there.
Going back towards the business landscape of things, having witnessed the evolution of the business landscape for over 25 years, what are some of the most significant changes that you've observed in how business operate and navigate legal challenges?
It's all got to do with technology, electronics, and that's particularly true in the private detective realm. When I was doing this stuff, you did most things by shoe leather or driving around, going to the courthouse, looking in
Hmm.
records, digging through crisscrosses, calling people up and asking them questions which really weren't, weren't really tied to what you wanted to know to get people to tell you things. And that was fun. It was very challenging to figure out how to approach a problem and get the information you wanted. Now, because I have friends who are still in the business, it's really a matter of technology and electronics. If you want to find somebody, locate somebody, there was a real art to that when I was coming up. Now there's still an art to it, but now it's all online.
It's all digital,
You
yeah.
get the right search engines, you get the right databases, and you work with that. And similarly in law, law is the law, and the law changes a lot, but your research is much more streamlined as opposed to what it was when I was.
Interesting. Within the diverse legal practices that you've served in, is there a specific domain that you find particularly stimulating or rewarding, and why?
You're talking about practice of law now, or?
Law. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when I first started out, like a lot of people starting out, I did trial work.
Yeah.
And I think that's really informed my writing. I did personal injury, I did criminal stuff, and I did business law. But I would try, whatever came in the office, I would go down to the courthouse, I would develop a case, do the research, do the discovery, and try the cases. And that's very challenging work in the sense that it's always competitive and it's always kind of rough. It's a rough game. It's a zero-sum game. You win or you lose. And that's okay.
Hmm.
I mean, I've played sports all my life. I'm used to that. But, when I got into the business stuff, which was an intentional transition, the reason I got into it was I realized if you're a trial lawyer, if you try a criminal case or a personal injury case, you never see your client again, win or lose, even if you win. But if you're a business lawyer and you do a good job, you got a client for life.
Yeah.
And that means repeating business. It makes it much easier to have a career. So I got into business law for that reason, but found that I really liked the idea of developing long-term relationships with people, getting to know their business, getting to know what their needs were, helping them decide how to handle things. And then the transactions that you did are usually everybody wins to some extent. Yeah, you want your guy to get the better end of the deal, but if you don't have a deal that works for both parties, you don't have a deal, So you
Yeah.
have to be able to figure out what your guy or your woman can give up to the other side that's important to them, that's not as important to you, so that you get a deal that you want that the other side can be content with.
Great answer. Reflecting on the trajectory of your career, what would be some advice that you'd give to your younger self? Especially concerning juggling the demands of the legal work that you do, plus having this creative passion for writing.
Life's an adventure, and all you have, everything that's in the past is a memory, and everything in the future is just an aspiration or a hope. You only have what's right now, and so for that reason, you really have to make today the best day it can be, or the best moment it can be. But I think taking a longer perspective of that, you only go around once, and I don't think anybody wants to go to their grave thinking, "Geez, I wish," or I don't think anybody does go to their grave saying, "Geez, I wish I would have worked harder." You probably think, "I wish I had more adventure or more fun." And I've taken that perspective. I had that perspective when I went to college, and been pretty true to that. I've tempered that with the realization that you got to make a living in this world, and I've done that. But I've never lost sight of the fact that, beyond making a decent living, raising a family, what matters is the quality of the life that you put together over your short time on earth. And that's what I've tried to do.
Fantastic answer.
It's an answer anyway.
It's an answer, but it's really, I mean, you often hear from people, oh, they go to the grave and you can't be buried with all the money. You can't, you know what I mean? It's spend time with the people that you love, do the things that you enjoy. Obviously, bills need to be paid, food needs to be on the table, but outside of that, none of it matters. Beyond legal expertise, what do you believe are some soft skills that are crucial for success in the field of business law?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who I've known ever since law school, who really focus on what I'll call the nerdy elements of the law, really knowing the law, the nitty gritty of it, and memorizing principles and cases. And they are often very good lawyers. But whether you're standing in front of a jury or whether you're trying to convince a client that you have an idea of how he should pursue a fork in the road, it really comes down to people skills. You have to understand yourself, first of all, but you also have to understand the person that you're working with and what their motivations are and what they really need. You can't browbeat your client into things. Well, whether you can, even if you can, it doesn't do any good because it doesn't get them where they want to be. Yeah. But I think learning to communicate with people, learning to be understanding their needs and their interests and focusing on building relationships. And you can't fake that. You got to be able to do that.
Genuine.
That's how I've made my living.
Yeah, I find that there's, the word sales often gets thrown around and people think that there's a negative connotation to it. And there might be to some extent, the used car salesman who's trying to sell you a crappy car that's, he knows is crappy, but is just trying to make money. But within each profession, sales really is relationship building and understanding the person's needs, understanding their pains. And if you have the solution, presenting that, right? And I find that that's common in every sort of business. You can't get away from it.
Well, you got to have business, otherwise you don't, in any line of work, you have to have business and you have to attract business and you have to do a good job to keep the business. Yeah, that is true. So it sort of relates, but I don't think people who simply are in it for the sale, for the score are going to have a long career because that becomes apparent after a while. What's your goal and motivation?
Do you have a favorite client story?
Sure. I have a lot of client stories. I hadn't really teed that one up in my mind. I'll tell you, this story, because it's probably one that's pivotal in my career, although it isn't certainly not the best story, but got kidnapped one night by a guy with a gun when I was a private detective. And that may be too strong a word, but I was forced into a trailer in a trailer park at 2:00 in the morning by a guy with a gun. I guess that counts. And, it sort of caused me to realize that if you pursue this sort of life of having, a wide-ranging, adventurous, free-form life and doing things that you can get yourself in positions of risk sometimes. So you have to have a certain level of prudence. When you're young, you're sort of a little bit of buccaneer sort of a personality, and you act accordingly. But I think, as time goes by, you have to be a little bit more careful and prudent as well. So, that night it was a case in which, well, it's a little bit of a long story. Do you have time for this?
Yeah, we got time. I'm excited.
This is before they had the Uniform Child Custody Act, by which different states would honor the rulings of the other states on child custody. So if you got divorced and got custody of your kid in Maryland and your spouse got a hold of that kid and brought that kid to Virginia courts would not enforce the custody decree of the Maryland courts.
Okay.
Right? Which is exactly what happened in my case. A woman, actually it was a man who came to us because he had gotten custody from the court in Maryland, and his wife and her boyfriend stole the kid and went to Virginia. And Virginia authorities or courts would not help them get the kid back. And it's really a tragic story. So they were, hired a lawyer in Virginia, and the lawyer said, you've got to find the kid and you have to get him back by self-help without causing a breach of the peace, using two, magic legal words. So they hired us, and we were told to find this kid. And so we knew who the boyfriend was, and we knew where he lived. And so I was on the shift where I was watching this trailer in this trailer park. And, they kind of got wise to the fact that there were the same cars pretending to follow them all day long for weeks on end. And, late at night, it was dark, and I got taken into this trailer and for the purpose of intimidating me, which I think they probably did a decent job of doing. But, so that's when I thought, I got to get out of this business. But we did get the kid back, or help the father get the kid back, although it took about 6 months to do it. And what lessons you learn from that? One is that the law is always advancing and always has holes in it, right? But, as I said, it tells you that there's a line between being prudent and being reckless. That's a pretty broad line.
Was that the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, for you to say, okay, I'm out, I'm changing career paths?
I think it was. Private detective business, it's boring, it's sometimes dangerous, and it's a grind. But you have these periods of adventure. Like once a week, In that 2 years I was in that job, I did something that was extraordinary. I ended up, doing some case which was like, my friends would just have their jaws on the floor when I told them the story. So you had this wonderful elation. I've always said a good case as a private detective is more satisfying than a good case as a lawyer. It's just much more of a high that it's involved in. But it is a grim business for the most part. So, I was ready to think about a more mainstream job at that point. And it did change my life.
Did you have kids and a family at the time that you were a private detective?
No, I wasn't even married at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took me a long time to get married.
Probably scary to marry. I couldn't imagine marrying a private detective, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Fair enough. As a seasoned lawyer, however, how do you mentor and inspire aspiring legal professionals, and what legacy do you hope to leave behind for them?
In my firm, over the years since I've been a partner there, I have taken on the role of being a mentor to several lawyers, and I don't know that I'm very good at it. I try to be, but mentorship is really important. As I say, I'm not sure that I have these skills, but I recognize how important they are. You really have to spend a lot of time understanding what the younger lawyer skills and weaknesses are and help them enhance their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. So I guess it takes a lot of time, which I don't mind the time, but maybe I'm just not as much of I don't do that much talking at that level with people. I just am not somebody who, I think this has been a very comfortable conversation, but I'm not the kind of person who's going to spend a lot of time talking about how you should change your life to be a better lawyer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how long have you been, so you're no longer practicing law?
Well, I'm retiring at the end of this year, actually. I've been practicing on a part-time basis, since my first book I published, which was 5 years ago.
Awesome. And are you planning, so basically when's like final date and then you're out?
December 31st, year ends and I'm done. I'm going to resign from the bar and, I won't be able to give legal advice anymore. Which, you do think about that because you never know when someone's going to say to you, hey, can you help me out with something? And I kind of wanted to preserve that, but doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to just hang up the spurs and just write books and do other stuff that I want to do.
Do you is there travel in mind with retiring, spending time with kids?
My wife and I have been, over the years, we have been trying to see every Major League Baseball park, see a game in every Major League Baseball park. And we've been doing that for a long time. I've only got 2 left. We've only got 2 left, Seattle and the Yankees. And so, we will see those probably this year. So, once we check that off, we'll probably be looking for, sort of a new, kind of a playful goal, something that is not, we're not going to sell our lives out to do it. Gives us a focus of how to, organize our vacations, I guess you might say. So we'll probably think of something along those lines to do.
Very cool. Any other stories that you want to share? Sorry, I'm still blown away by that story. I was like, I want more. Any other favorite client stories from the law side, or even from the private detective side too?
When I was a younger lawyer trying cases, not that long ago, maybe 15 years ago. If you read the Joth Proctor books, you'll see that there is a topless bar in these books. And one of the principal characters, these stories have the same circle of 5 or 6 characters that repeat in each book. And one of them is Irish Dan Crowley, who runs the local topless bar in Arlington, Virginia. When I was trying cases, I represented the local topless bar in Arlington, Virginia, and I did a lot of work for them. Mostly it was drunk driving, drunk in public, petty drug offenses, things like that, getting people out of trouble who were associated with the place. But there was a case in which a dancer was involved in a bar fight. Actually, it was at another bar. People from my client's bar went to another bar where they got into one of these pool cue swinging, beer bottle swinging bar fights. And somebody from my client's team kicked a guy from the other bar in, I think the medical term is the nuts. And the guy lost a testicle. It's a terrible story. And so criminal charges were brought against a girl from my client's bar. And I tried that case to a jury in Fairfax County, Virginia. And that was a circus because, first of all, it's a lascivious story. Second of all, most of the witnesses were these dancers who came into these skirts so short they were hardly skirts. And the jurors were all hanging over the jury railing, looking at them walking in and out. So people's focus wasn't where it should be. I remember sitting there at the table thinking to myself, boy, this is going to be a good story someday. And indeed it was. So I tried that case and the woman was found not guilty. And I think she was not guilty. I think it was a dark place. People were drunk and the poor guy mistook who kicked them for somebody else. But I used that story, changed to protect the innocent and the guilty in, I think, in my second or third novel. It's not the focal point of the story, but what I have done is in these stories, I've often taken little vignettes from my life as either a detective or a lawyer, and I've weaved them into the story where they fit and made sense. And I think it worked out as a good little sideline story in that novel. And I'll keep doing it. I've got a lot of tales to tell, both as a lawyer and then
Have to have you back when we have more time and just solely focus on the history of your stories. That's really cool. Well, from my side of things, I kind of went through all of my questions here. Jim, do you have anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not here to ask questions. I'm here to answer them. I've really enjoyed talking to you. You've asked great questions, and it's been fun. Look forward to seeing the final results. I'm going to keep writing these books. I think they're interesting books. They sort of have their continuation. We can read them independently one at a time, but they do follow along. And I would just say that I'm having a hell of a good time writing.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, where can we find the books?
Well, they're on Amazon, on Principal. You can find them in a lot of places. My website is www.jamesvirving.com. You can get them there as well, and you can also see other information about me and the stories. And I hope people will pick them up, and give them a read, and give a good review on Amazon.
Awesome. For our listeners, I'll make sure that the Amazon store and that Jim's website is going to be linked below as well, so that you guys can pick them up. Jim, thank you so much.